A make-or-break week for Joe Biden. He appears to be fighting for his political survival. As he hosts leaders from around the world for a NATO summit, the stakes couldn't be higher. Sir Keir Starmer's winging his way to Washington for that summit in his first big foreign trip as PM. Will Mr Biden's health be the elephant in the room? Hello, welcome to Newsnight Live each weeknight with interviews and insight. Let me introduce your panel for this evening. We have Michaela Loach, who is author of It's Not That Radical. She is a climate change activist. We've got from former Conservative MP, former Chancellor, former Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng here tonight. And we have former British Ambassador to the US, Lord Kim Darroch. Welcome all of you. Thank you for being with us. We're going to start with and Nick's here as well. Hi. I don't know why I always say it as though you're an add-on. You're absolutely integral, Nick. We know that.
I'm honoured you've remembered me.
Don't be daft. No. We are going to start with some really serious stuff going on in the United States, an extraordinary drama, actually. Today, the NATO summit gets underway in Washington, D.C. Joe Biden is hosting. He is due to be speaking any time around now. That's Jens Stoltenberg, actually, speaking right now. If we hear from Mr Biden, we'll cross to him. Sir Keir Starmer isn't there yet. The UK Prime Minister arrives in the next few hours for his first foreign trip in the role. Top of the official agenda at this summit, of course, the war in Ukraine. Top of the unofficial agenda, the stamina and mental acuity of Joe Biden. Keir Starmer will have a one-to-one meeting with the 81-year-old tomorrow, to be a fly on the wall. And that against the backdrop of a small but growing number of senior Democrats who are calling on Mr Biden to step aside for a younger candidate rather than seek re-election later this year. And this is why.
Total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. There's been a lot of speculation. What's Joe going to do? Is he going to stay in the race? Is he going to drop out? What's he going to do? Well, here's my answer. I am running and going to win again. I'll beat Donald Trump. I will beat him again in 2020.
You are now connected to Air Force One.
OK, thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, congratulations. What a hell of a victory. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm getting so frustrated by the elites. Now, I'm not talking about you guys, but about the elites in the party who they know so much more. But any of these guys don't think I should run against me. Go ahead, announce for president. Challenge me at the convention. Look at my career. I've not had many of those nights. It was a terrible night, and I really regret it happened. But the fact of the matter is, how can you assure you're going to be on faith that can intervene on your way to go to work tomorrow? Age wasn't, the idea I'm too old.
We're going to talk live to a man who knows Joe Biden well in just a moment. Mo Vella used to work for him. First, Kim Darroch, I wonder if you are experiencing what's apparently being called Biden anxiety.
Absolutely, I am. When I was in Washington, finished in 2019, I remember talking to people about him before he actually declared his presidency ambitions and ran. And they said, if Joe Biden runs, he will be a transitional president. He will do one term because he'll be too old after the end of his first term. And he will be the man who can beat Donald Trump because he has a great appeal to the blue collar classes. But that will be it. He'll do 4 years. And look, I watched that debate live, and it was toe-curling, and you've shown some clips from it. But the whole performance, he could barely string together a coherent sentence. He certainly wasn't capable of pushing back on every Trump intervention which was a mix of wild exaggeration and total fantasy. So yes, of course I'm worried, because I think it's quite consequential for the whole of the West if Donald Trump is the next president.
Kwasi Kwarteng, you're agreeing with that, the fact that it will be consequential for the world. Politics is about momentum.
Sure.
You have known what it feels like when power drains away. Just describe that for our audience.
So what I think the best description of it would be when Hemingway said, how do people become bankrupt? He said, first slowly and then very quickly. And it's the same in politics. You know, you can feel that things are moving against you. But actually, when the denouement happens, it happens very quickly. And I suspect with Biden, if he does get removed or if he decides not to run, that will happen very, very quickly. He's never going to say ahead of the event, oh, I'm thinking about not running. You would never do, because once you've said that, you're dead.
That's it, yeah.
So you have to say, I'm running. And then all of a sudden, it could all fall away.
Michaela Loach, you, as a climate activist, you've got a network of contacts across New York and Texas in particular. How do your co-activists there look at the choice that they appear to have when it comes to this US presidential election?
Yeah, I think what's getting lost in this conversation about maybe Joe Biden's mental state is the policy itself. The fact that I think a lot of votes are being lost because Joe Biden is now known as Genocide Joe to a lot of people. The fact that he has aided and abetted Israel in their assault on Gaza, which the Lancet said yesterday in one of their reports, that the death toll is probably more likely to be 186,000 people. That's 186,000 loved, like immeasurably sacred and important human beings whose lives have been lost in a huge way because of arms that have been sent directly from the US and money that's been given from the US. And I think it's really important that we don't forget the policy issues that people also care about around this conversation.
Kim Darrett, you know the White House well. What will be going on behind closed doors in private, even if publicly Joe Biden's saying, I'm in it to win it, Jill Biden's saying he answered all the questions?
Yeah. Joe Biden has assembled over his extraordinarily long career, 50-odd years in America. He became a senator at the age of 30-odd. Some really trusted allies and aides who are with him pretty much to the end. And I think they will be reassuring him that this is retrievable. But I promise you, because you can see the leaks coming out of the White House, unattributable leaks coming out of the White House, that there are a fair number of people there who have encountered the president when he has had moments like he had in that debate. And I think to themselves, well, is this guy really right for another 4 years? And is he even able to really conduct the campaign and win the presidency in November?
But the problem they have, and I see it as a big political problem, is that, yes, Biden may be a weak candidate, but the mess that you're going to go through to get another candidate could be prohibitive. They could decide, the party elites, the people who are in charge, sort of, could decide, well, actually, it's worse.
You're absolutely right. And if he resists, it's very, very hard to push him out.
That's right.
If he were to decide, under pressure from someone whose opinion he really rates, that he will stand down voluntarily and preside over a process leading to the Democrat convention in August in Chicago, to choose another candidate, then it can be relatively stable and normal process. Happened before. 68, LBJ stands down, and we eventually end up after a contested convention.
And the decision-making for if Joe Biden were to decide to stand down is a tiny number of people, isn't it? It's his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, it's his sister, Valerie Biden Owens. I mean, that's literally it. And it's almost reminiscent of Margaret Thatcher when she could technically go through in 1990. And it was Dennis Thatcher who said, Margaret, don't humiliate yourself.
You're right. But there is one other category which really counts, which is the big figure donors.
The donors, that's
and
right.
if they say to him, look, Joe, you're not the man for November, then that can make a big impact.
And he's trying to see that off by saying they're the elites.
But I think again, like, we're here still talking about this same conversation and not thinking about the people who he's meant to represent as the electorate. And I think that increasing their living standards is what's important.
Agreed.
And if we're not actually pushing him to change policy that will actually address the needs of the American people,
But that's a
then
wider
what
political
policy.
I mean, that isn't related to his age. I mean, that's related to the political positions he's adopted. And I think any person who was the Democratic candidate would face exactly those pressures, because clearly Gaza's a huge issue, as it was here.
Yeah.
In terms of the left coalition that they rely on to win the election.
Yeah, and I think I would just say then, if we're going to replace Joe Biden with someone else, we're going to have the same policy issues, and we should still be putting pressure on, and that's important. And I think also that I'm not sure if we should be taking advice from someone who crashed the economy in a few days of being in the job as a councillor. I
know you want to do all that political stuff. We're here to have a broad discussion. But thank you anyway for reminding me of that.
To be fair, Michaela can say whatever she wants. And as you can in response.
And I can say whatever I want in response.
And can Derek, you too can say whatever you want as well. We're going to talk live now to someone who knows Joe Biden well. Mo Vella was Director of Administration and was a senior advisor to Mr Biden when he was Vice President. Mo Vella, thank you very much for talking to our British audience. Should Mr Biden step aside?
Well, first of all, I know Joe Biden, as you pointed out. And by the way, I'm glad not to be in the middle of that debate from your panel. They're all so distinguished, and I'm glad to avoid that today. But I will tell you this. I know Joe Biden, and what I know about him is this. I trust that he will make the best decision. He's dedicated his entire adult life to our nation in service to our country, and in a distinguished manner. And I trust he's going to make the right decision. Should he get out? I think he has earned the right to be respected and to be treated with dignity, and let him make his decision based on the values that he possesses. And I know he's going to put our country and our democracy first. If he chooses to stay in, we will rally behind him. If he chooses to get out, we will rally behind whoever is the next candidate.
I mean, Mr Vella, I am going to push you. What do you want him to do? What do you think he should do?
Look, I actually come from a personal perspective. I actually love him and Dr. Biden greatly. They're very special friends of mine. And so my concern is for his well-being, as well as our nation and our democracy. I would like him to do what is in the best interest of his health. I am concerned about what I saw at the debate. It was abysmal at best. So I don't get on here or any television interview anywhere in the world and pretend that wasn't the case. That would be ridiculous. However, I also know him, and I know that he is a resilient, strong, bright, brilliant man.
And he may be.
And so I'm not convinced yet that he needs to get out. So let me just say that.
OK, well, that is interesting, because millions of people can see with their own eyes and ears that he is struggling.
He struggled on Thursday night of the debate. He's also struggled since I worked for him and before that. And I think people are forgetting this. His speech patterns have never been smooth. And
come on, Mr. Vella.
I've never heard anybody call him articulate.
Right.
That's never been his style for the 40 years, 50 years. So this should not be a surprise to everybody. My concern is I saw it heightened and enhanced at the debate, and that's why I'm concerned. I want to make sure that it's nothing more than just a continuation of his, inarticulate speech patterns. He's been that way for his entire public service career.
I mean, that forgive me, that does feel like spin. I'm going to read you one of the sentences, one of the lines that he gave to Morning Joe yesterday. This is it. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is, how can you assure you can be out on your way to go, to work tomorrow? Age wasn't, the idea, and I'm too old. Now, that was supposed to be reassuring to people.
Here's the deal. First of all, I take offense to anybody telling me I'm spinning, because this is my former boss and my friend, and I'm being honest with the people of the United Kingdom. I am concerned. I admitted that. I thought his performance was abysmal, but I am not prepared to engage in ageism either. If you're going to pick apart Mr. Biden's sentences, then you should be doing equal time in picking apart Mr. Trump's.
Well,
that's where I get a little bit upset and frustrated, frankly, is because you're right to be worried about Mr. Biden. I'm worried about him too. I'm worried about our democracy even more. And so let's be equal here. As I said to Piers Morgan the other night, let's be equal opportunity criticizers. If we're going to pick one apart, we're going to pick them both apart. There's plenty of picking to do on both sides at this point if this is going to be the topic.
Thank you, Mo Vella. We are going to hear from Joe Biden right now. He's addressing the NATO summit.
They knew to prevent future wars, to protect democracies, to lay the groundwork for lasting peace and prosperity, they needed a new approach. They needed to combine their strengths. They needed an alliance. And here they signed the Washington Treaty and created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the single greatest, most effective defensive alliance in the history of the world. Mr. Secretary General, leaders of NATO countries, foreign and defense ministers, representatives from partner nations and the European Union, and members of Congress, distinguished guests, welcome, welcome to the 2024 NATO Summit. It's a pleasure.
Come on. Yep. Boxes, boxes. So that was Joe Biden addressing world leaders, except Keir Starmer, who's still in a plane, at the Mellon Auditorium. It's the 75th anniversary of the NATO summit. Was I being ageist, as Mo Vella suggested?
No, I don't think you were. I think you raised a legitimate concern. I know Michaela's talking about the policy, but there's a concern about his own critical faculties and his ability and his mental stamina to do another 4 years. It's not just about what he can do this year.
Yeah.
If we re-elect him, or if rather the Americans re-elect him, he'll be there potentially until he's 86, and he's 81 now.
Sure. Keir Starmer is having a bilateral meeting with Joe Biden tomorrow. Afterwards, people like you, people like me, everybody who's travelling with the Prime Minister on the plane will want to know, how was Joe Biden? I mean, he will not want to be answering that question, will he?
Well, I mean, Keir Starmer is going to be very close to Joe Biden. I think it's going to be a bilateral meeting in the White House. They'll sit on those famous chairs that you have that's so well known, Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, all that sort of stuff. And I imagine Keir Starmer will be asked about this. And Keir Starmer, I imagine, will say the following. You could get Kim Darroch to write this. The presidential election in the United States is a matter for the people of the United States to decide. A completely neutral statement. But obviously this week really matters. I mean, you saw Joe Biden there. In a sense, that's the easy bit. When you saw his head moving side to side, that means he's reading the auto cue. Sure. It's all scripted. It's the unscripted bit that gets difficult. Exactly. And he has got a press conference at the end of the summit.
A solo press conference.
And John Kirby, the White House National Security Communications Advisor, said this is a big boys press conference. He's going to be on his own. And interestingly, this is going to be the first big solo press conference Joe Biden will have done in the United States since November 2022, because his team have cocooned him.
That's right.
And this is why the White House press corps are sort of asking such incredibly hostile questions, because the criticism is that they've been sort of complicit in not letting the world know what's going on, to which they say, well, no, this was shielded, and they're really not happy about that.
Yeah, and in the last half hour, the 7th House Democrat, Congresswoman, I beg your pardon, Mikey Sherrill, has called for him to step down. So it's a small but growing number, and if there are errors in that press conference, then one would imagine those calls will grow louder, would they, Ladara?
Absolutely. I mean, Nick is right about how important this press conference is. He has been cocooned for months, literally, and he, like no other president in recent history, and so this will be a real moment for him. It's not as tough as a debate, because you don't have people coming back at you, and you're not required to sort of expound policy, at length, which he really struggled to do in the debate. But this will be a big challenge for him. And you're right, if more Democrats, and quite a lot of them, by the way, are saying stuff that's critical of him without going on the record. But if more come out on the record, then it's very bad for him.
I mean, I had... Oh, sorry.
So forgive me. The biggest problem we've got in this situation, because Michaela made the point about the policy, is that nobody's going to be talking about policy. Every time he does a press conference, every time he does a debate, every time he says anything, people will be having the conversation that we're having about the status of his health, his mental acuity, is he going to be able to finish a sentence? And that will drown out the substantive issues in terms of policy.
But some of the questions that are being asked of the White House press secretary are things like,
oh, it's really tough.
It's like,
has he had a Parkinson's test?
Have you had a Parkinson's test? How can you be trusted with the nuclear codes if you can't even finish a sentence on Medicare? I mean, it's really personal stuff.
It's really tough stuff, and essentially what the White House is saying is this is the life story of Joe Biden, the guy from Scranton, Pennsylvania. He struggled. Everything has been a struggle, and you saw that in your interview there about how, you know, he famously has a stammer. He struggles. But I mean, I had an example of how protected Joe Biden is when I covered his visit to Belfast about a year and a half ago. Now, I did the first Clinton visit, and I think it was in 1995. You couldn't move in Belfast because it's not a very big city, and if the President of the United States moves in a not very big city, you can't move. I remember walking around Belfast saying, well, what's going on? Is the President here? And it was because he was cocooned in his hotel. He didn't come out till midday, and when he came out, he did one speech and then he went. But interestingly, it's important to say that, yes, there are, as you say, 7 congressional Democrats who've said he should go, but the New York Times and Washington Post are reporting now that the leadership in the House, the Democratic leadership in the House and the Democratic leadership in the Senate are not calling for him to go. And the Washington Post is saying at the moment that they think the ground is subtly moving on the Hill to shore up Joe Biden. The question is, as Kim says, does that stay the same for the rest of the week?
Sure. Is that position sustainable? Thank you very much, Lord Kim Darrett, for being with us and talking to our audience. We appreciate it. We're going to talk about British politics now. Here today, new MPs and re-elected ones turned up at the House of Commons as the new Parliament sat for the first time, and it really showed today how dignified and courteous and humorous our Commons can be.
May I too, who is here for the first time starting their great responsibility.
For those of us in my party, let me begin with a message to those who are no longer sitting behind me. I am sorry. We have lost too many diligent, community-spirited representatives.
When I was a new member in 1987, there were only 40 female members of Parliament. Today we have 264.
Just yesterday, you asked after my health following my active campaign.
We are the new kids on the block. We have no experience in this Parliament whatsoever, even though some of us have tried many times over the years previously to get here.
And I have every confidence, Mr. Speaker, that you will continue to ensure that representatives here are treated fairly, because our constituents should be treated fairly too. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
I don't know if you managed to see any of that today, Michaela Loach. How did it make you feel?
I think I felt really excited. I mean, I was out door knocking for both Jeremy Corbyn's independent campaign and for the Green Party as well. And the fact that the Green Party won all 4 seats that they campaigned to win is a huge, huge win. They quadrupled their representation in Parliament, and 5 pro-Palestine independents also won, which is so huge. I think people aren't really recognising how big it is that these candidates went from 0 votes because they were not from a party to getting like 15,000, 20,000 votes. That's really big.
And how do you want them to use that power in this 5-year term?
I mean, it'd be amazing to see them work together to try and put pressure on together. I think
to do what? Pressure for what?
In particular, around ending arms sales to Israel. I think, and ending arms licensing to Israel would be a really, really big thing that these parties, independents and Greens could do, because the Greens not only ran on climate justice, they also ran on solidarity with the Palestinian people. And on top of that as well, I think we've seen a really, really important commitment from Labour in that they've said that they're going to have no new oil and gas fields, and that's amazing. But what I'd also love them to see is to not go on with fields like Jackdaw that was approved by Kwasi Kwarteng, which, as I've said before, I don't think his political record shows that we should be continuing with it.
This, on oil and gas, I'm completely opposed to what you're saying, because all that's going to happen if we ban and stop North Sea exploration is we're going to import. We're going to import. No, I do know it's true. We're going to import gas, natural gas from Qatar, from the US at a much higher price, and you're not actually helping reduce
I think
carbon emissions.
It's really important for me to challenge this, because it's just this line that you put out a lot when you were the Minister for Bees, but is currently churned out by the Conservatives, when actually all oil and gas that's extracted in the North Sea, it's sold on the global market to the highest bidder. It doesn't end up staying in the UK. It doesn't reduce our energy bills.
Of our gas
it doesn't end up
that we
getting
use
us energy security.
came from the North Sea.
But it's sold on the global market to the highest bidder. It's 80% of it's exported.
Okay.
So I think that increasing North Sea oil and gas doesn't actually help this country at all.
But as you
what
said,
it does help is multi-billion-pound fossil
as you said, it's a
companies.
global business, and I think by shutting down your industry here, you're simply going to be more reliant on those industries elsewhere.
I'm going to bring in Nick because he has some intel about the first shadow cabinet meeting with the leader of the opposition.
That's right. So lots of warm words in the House of Commons chamber. And then, as you say, Rishi Sunak chaired his first meeting of the shadow cabinet, where Kemi Badenoch, who is now shadowing Angela Rayner, absolutely let rip. She talked about how the former Prime Minister's decision to call an early election and not to inform the cabinet was a mistake, and she said it bordered on the unconstitutional. And then we can sort of look at then what Kemi Badenoch said. She talked about how Rishi Sunak's decision to come back from the D-Day commemorations early was disastrous, and had he not done that, then Penny Mordaunt would have kept her seat. Kemi Badenoch says that Suella Braverman, who is giving a speech to a right-wing organisation in Washington, is having what she described as a very public nervous breakdown. And then she talked about how Rishi Sunak hadn't properly informed members of the cabinet, but had told her inner circle, including Craig Williams, his former parliamentary private secretary, who then placed a bet, and she described Craig Williams as a buffoon. Now, this story was first broken by Stephen Swinford in The Times. It's on the front page of The Times. I have had it confirmed by people who were at that meeting, and they sort of were both astonished and not surprised, because they always know that Kemi Badenoch does like to speak her mind. But somebody said to me that her approach when she said, let's not leak this, was they regarded as naive and tin-eared.
But who leaked it? I mean, this is what I find fascinating, because when I was in Cabinet, you would the next day, usually in the Times, and it was usually with Steve Swinford, you'd get a blow-by-blow account that actual members of the Cabinet couldn't remember that level of detail. So clearly someone's writing down everything that's being said.
Or recording it.
Or recording it.
On the times when I've had these leaks, I obviously have absolutely no idea where the leaks
they've come from
when they've come to me. But what somebody told me...
But you must know. I mean, you were in Cabinet, and you will have conversations, presumably, where you go, well, who is it? Who do we think it is?
And actually,
then presumably you go, Michael, was it you?
I was very close to Philip Hammond, actually, in the end of the sort of Theresa May era. I was his parliamentary private secretary, his sort of bag carrier. And actually one of my jobs was to try and figure out who was leaking. And it usually boiled down to one or two cabinet ministers.
Who?
And you knew who they were. I'm not going to say. I mean, you can't possibly comment on who they were.
Well, why not? I mean, they're not in Cabinet anymore, are they?
And what I was amazed at with this leak of the shadow cabinet is that, you know, half the people that with the old leakers have gone. Yeah. They've either stood down like me or they've lost their seats. So there's a whole bunch of new leakers who are starting immediately.
And how do you, let me ask Michaela, how do you view this sort of stuff?
It feels like, for the Conservatives, like politics is just like a game and like a job that they get and a fun thing that they...
Sure Labour people will leak. Labour, it's not, this is a cross-party thing.
I also feel like for you as well, like, why are you here? Like, you're no longer in politics, and I feel like that...
To be fair, we invited him.
No, I know that, but why are you choosing to come here? I do think
so
that...
So what, I shouldn't come at all?
Well, I think that there's a nature, I feel like, in the Conservative Party in particular, of just, like, almost having fun with it and leaking.
So no, I appreciate the conversations we have, and it's good to have debate, and that's why I'm here. And so I'm very grateful for you to invite me.
I'm going to look at the front pages of tomorrow's papers. The Times. Oh look, Badenoch takes swipe at Sunak over election decisions, and the main story, Starmer is playing with fire on defence spending. The Eye, Thames water boss takes a £195,000 bonus as firms ask for a 59% bill hike, and they dump double raw sewage. The Express, cleverly, Labour has hung a huge open sign on the White Cliffs of Dover. The Mirror, bond of brothers. That's ahead of, obviously, England's semi-final tomorrow. And if they get to the final playing Spain, Daily Telegraph PM could boost the size of the armed forces. And I think there's one more. No, maybe not. Thank you, both of you, very much for being with us. The time does go quickly. Time flies when you're having fun, it would seem. Now, change has been a familiar word over the last few weeks, and it can definitely be applied to the England men's football team. When did they go from being terrified of penalty shootouts to suddenly loving them? Striker Ivan Toney was one of the stone-cold penalty takers in Saturday's quarter-final against Switzerland and impressed everyone with his no-look kick. In other words, he stared at the goalkeeper throughout and didn't once look down at the ball. On the eve of England's semi-final clash with the Netherlands tomorrow night, the England team's social media feed released this video showing that Ivan has applied his no-look technique to a few other leisure activities. Good luck to England for tomorrow.